Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome. We're continuing on our Mission in May theme. And so this morning, we've got a bit of a tag team. Sarah and I are sort of leading this message because it is largely a feedback for you guys on what the church is actually doing in mission. We've had people here. Last week we had Craig from Engage Work Faith talking about mission. Next week we've got Dave Helyard the same. This week we actually want to tell you what's happening currently with church. So that's where we're at. So we're going to start off with that. And I want to start with a scripture. I'm well aware of time, so I want to keep this relatively short. I could have added 3 or 4 scriptures here, but just a simple one from James chapter 2. And that is, suppose a brother or a sister is without clothes and daily food. If one of you says to them, go in peace, keep warm and well fed, but does nothing about their physical needs, what good is it? In the same way, faith by itself, if it is not accompanied by action, is dead. Salvation, as you well know, is by grace alone. It's not by works. But someone who is saved and filled with the Spirit of Jesus will have a heart for others. It is inevitable. Love is actually not real unless it's shared. You can't have love by itself in that sense. And so this is really our calling as a church. So we're stepping out on that. And it's not just James who talked about this. Remember, Jesus talked about it. And he said, some will stand before me. And he says about, did you visit me in prison? Did you feed me? Did you clothe me when I was naked? It was important to Jesus. Paul, when he was writing to the church in Galatians, chapter 2, verse 10, said, remember the poor. It was interesting. If one takes the timing of that scripture and assumes that that's after the Jerusalem Council, then he was actually saying that's actually what all the early church leaders said. When it comes to expression of faith, it wasn't about following the law, but he said, remember the poor. So this is actually a really important part of our mission. So this is just for 4 months. So this is only from the beginning of January to the first week in May. So we're not talking about a long period of time. Southland Compassion, you'll note the 2 emblems up the top. We've got Southland Church in the marketplace, and then we have Southland Compassion, which is our mission arm that is also tax deductible. So sometimes the mission has to go into different categories depending on the incorporation rules. So in that 4 months, Southland Compassion has given over $20,000 to mission at a local and global level. And then on top of that, the church has given over $7,500 to other local and global missions. Now that is just in 4 months from this building. And now I'm going to get Sarah to come up and it's all working, it's on your slide.
Okay. We've talked about this before, but one of the first things we're doing at a more local level is gathering food and putting it in cupboards we have here to then be giving out just at a local level. Last year we were able to give bags of groceries to Springbank Secondary College, and through their chaplaincy program there, they were able to give these bags of food out to various families in need that she knew of, and we were able to help supply that. Otherwise, she would have had to be sort of hitting the supermarkets herself. But we, and I say we, were able to provide bags and bags. And in fact, that picture on up there is actually all the bags that were going just on one occasion. So no doubt that poor woman had to bring up a trolley or, go up and down the lift a few times, because there was quite a bit there. And we knew from the outset we were asked if we could provide for about 3 or 4 families on that occasion. Some other opportunities we're having of giving out food is various people have approached to us, say on behalf of families here or families that they know, and because there is plenty there, I've been able to just say, be generous and, take your bags and take the food to these various families. Some of this is just really on the down low, but I can tell you now that what we're providing in those cupboards is moving out to various people. But they know it's coming through Southland Church or from Southland Church. There's another young lady that I'm supporting. Every time I catch up for coffee with her, I'm giving her bags of food that will enable her and her husband and her little one to just keep going and keep eating and having food and having access to decent food that is not just sort of Macca's on the run sort of thing, as well as trying to have a tiny. You're not able to get out and do lots of cooking and planning and that sort of thing. So I can vouch that the food that we're gathering is going out on your behalf, which is really, really lovely. And I have to say, as the bags go out, I'm actually feeling a sense of, pride is not the right word. Proud of my kids, a bit that sense, like, my goodness, we as a church are able to provide for these people. So, I'm feeling really blessed and I don't know if proud's the right word, depending on your definition of it, but on our behalf, I'm just thinking, wow, go. And I wish I could tell you more stories about the people who are receiving this, but for confidentiality, I won't. The other thing, or another one that we're providing for is through Genesis, and they have a variety of things. They do the counselling, but they run 2 programs. One is for young mums with tinies, and they run weekends, and they are enabling these young mums to actually have another set of hands to help them. And I know we have some volunteers from our church who go. Yep. But these young mums are also learning how to be parents, how to be mums. And things that, if your baby is crying, it's actually, at that age, they're actually needing something, and how do you work out what they need, as opposed to they're being naughty or we'll ignore them or we'll put them away. Because their lessons in parenting have actually come from them, from their parents, and that's been not good. So these young mums are actually learning how to be loving parents, loving mums, and to relax into it. The other program that is run is also providing opportunity for women who have had abortions to have weekends together with others and to be counselled and to be supported and to be reassured that whatever struggles that they're having post-abortion, they're being ministered to, they're being counselled, they're having services provided to them. And in the process, they're actually able to sit down and fellowship and have food and meals, because we are providing food to enable Genesis to put on nice food and nice meals and to treat these women really loving and respectfully in a way to enable them to sort of overcome the trauma that they've had. And no doubt a lot of pressures that they've had in having to have the abortion in the process. Relationship breakdown. The place that they go to for this is this particular house, which is probably about 15 minutes away. There's an amazing story as to how they even came to purchase this place. And our connection with Genesis started just as they'd signed the paper for the mortgage, thinking, how now are we going to pay for this? And then we made contact and say, how we're happy to, we'd like to support you, and how can we? And the email came back, well, oh my goodness, what such timing. We've just signed this mortgage. Gary and I had the opportunity of going about a month ago for a bit of they had a bit of an open house as such, morning tea, tour and a talk. And we got to see inside this place. And this place is where these young mums go for their couple of weekends in a row. And then on other occasions, it's a weekend for these women post-abortion. And they've done an amazing job. It actually used to be a hostel, I think, and prior to that maybe a church. But they've got about 5 rooms set up with a double bed and a cupboard and a bassinet. And each of the young mums can go in there, and that's their room for the weekend. And it's just really lovely for them to have just obviously a roof over their head, a lovely bed, a bassinet for their babe, and a cupboard to hang up their stuff. And that's their room for that whole weekend. And then there's the large meeting area where they have meals together, a ginormous industrial washing machine. There's a beautiful backyard with a few little bits of play equipment and shade cloth and an outdoor setting. So Genesis have set this place up to be a real blessing to these young mums. And it's just so beautiful. I wish you could all be in there having a look. I tried to take a few happy snaps, but my photos are shocking, so it was better I just showed you this lovely photo from the outside. But Genesis have worked really hard to make this place a really lovely place for these young mums and women to go to. They've even thought of like a path up the side so that the women can push their prams up and then get in at the back where there's a little bit of a ramp, because there are steps out the front. It's really a lovely place, and I can tell you from the stories we've been hearing through Genesis, the money we've been donating and the voluntary support we've been able to offer from this church has been so well received. So well received. So thank you very much. I'll hand to Garry.
One of the things that I really love about the Genesis thing too is that it's, as you well know, this church is very strong on its focus on trying to impact in a godly way the laws of this land. And we stood against the extension of the abortion to birth legislation, but that's not enough, because the question is always then, well, if the woman does actually carry the child to full term, who's there to help her? Like, you actually have to get your hands dirty and actually get out there. That's what Jesus did. Jesus actually went to the broken. And the same with women who have had abortions and then actually many of them will feel great guilt and shame. And then if they actually feel like they want to return back to God, someone needs to be there. And these programs are exactly what that does. It gives people, it just allows Jesus to reach out in a different way to reach them in their brokenness. And thank you to the volunteers, as Sarah mentioned, who are helping there. Very quietly, often doing shifts on the weekends for this number of our women here. Great stuff. Okay, School of Leadership. You saw a little bit of it this morning, so I won't go into it too much. The first part of it is actually covered by Southland Church, as you'll see, not Compassion, because this is not a tax-deductible type thing at this point here. So what's happening here is basically we're paying Quentin Howlett, who you saw on the video. We pay Quentin money there. I think it's about $500 every 2 months combined, to help subsidise him, because he could be actually operating as a lecturer, professor at other Bible colleges that pay a lot more. But we keep the costs down. To give you an idea of how good this is, if you're in Australia at the moment, you're paying, give or take, around about $2,500 per subject at theological college. Right? It's probably $100 either way, but that's about what you'll pay, be it Tabor, BCSA, Alpha Crucis, wherever. About $2,500. We're getting this thing for $140 a subject. So it puts it in perspective. This is an amazing blessing. So we are, therefore, we're trying to make disciples, and part of that is to raise up people who want to study theological studies, but with a particular focus on ministry. And so we've been paying these guys through. There are currently 8 who are at the moment doing that course. I've got Felicity, there's Kim and Brett, Sneha, Rena, Catherine, Savannah and TK, and apologies if I've forgotten anyone. So the church is actually paying for those guys to be doing that 2-year course that you saw Leah, Tristan, Tom and Heather graduate from. So that's continuing on. Now we move to the compassion side of it, because this is now about education. And currently we're funding these guys in their churches. The vast majority of these guys are already pastors. They have very little income. Many of them, as you could probably imagine, tithes are not going to be a lot. And so they don't have the money for education. And so we're able to step in there and help. All of those candidates there that we're supporting are across the African continent. There's a couple of testimonies there. It's easy to read up here. I'm happy to read it because I know some people will be listening online. But first and foremost, I would like to thank you for the opportunity given to me to enhance my knowledge and understanding with regards to ministry. And for that reason, it is a great privilege for me to share my experience and growth in the ministry because of my studies. My studies thus far have really enlightened, empowered and refocused my attention on local evangelism and made me understand that I am an apprentice in the ministry. I'm truly grateful for this opportunity. Interesting that Quentin talked about that apprenticeship idea, walking alongside Jesus. So that's an example of one student. Another student here, it is a great honour to be part of School of Leadership. The studies have enlightened my understanding about the Word of God. Through this course, my confidence level has increased and I'm able to preach and do other presentations confidently, knowing very well that I really understand what I am presenting. I have been very much equipped and I sincerely say thank you to the sponsors and the entire team for the great opportunity to learn more about God's kingdom. We don't realise in Australia how important this education is, because in a lot of places that we're dealing with, there is a combination of sort of Christianity, bits and pieces of Christianity have been heard, and then it's mixed with sort of animism. All sorts of other bits and pieces get caught up in it. And yet people are faithfully trying to lead churches, teach in churches, but they haven't had that background. And so through the School of Leadership, we can actually offer, through Southland Church, actually paying for these people to study so they can actually get that understanding and then bring that teaching into their churches. So it's actually helping to grow the kingdom. So you guys are doing an amazing job. Again, that is coming from Southland Compassion. When you see those envelopes and we talk about it, the welcomers, this is what you're actually doing. You're actually making a significant difference in the kingdom of God. So now I'll hand over to Sarah to talk about Indonesia.
Okay. I think, I'm not sure if Gary's mentioned this, just snippets throughout the last 4 months, but the money that we've sent has been used at sort of like larger functions, larger events as such. A couple of things I really want to point out here is that this is a place that Garry and I have had the honour of visiting once sort of about 10 or so years ago, and then again last year. And when we visited last year, it was a bit like we'd picked up with this couple who we hadn't seen for 10 years as if we were best buddies. It was just so lovely to see. Those of you who know me, I can be a bit of quick to cry, and just despite the lack of language, when I met Pastor Lily, we just hugged each other and cried. Can't speak the same language together, but it was just such an honour and a blessing for us to actually meet up with Pastor Lily and Pastor Daniel again. But their courage just put me to shame, really. They are in a country where Christianity is not encouraged and not welcomed. And when we first offered to partner with them regarding finances, they were most appreciative. But the money we send, it's within like a reasonable amount of time, they are so quick to send back to us and say, this is how we spent the money. And without actually showing us the receipts, but they are just accounting for absolutely everything. And look, we're really sorry that we haven't got back to you sooner with regard to how we spent the money. And it's like, my goodness, like, that's fine. Like, we trust you implicitly, but they are just wanting so much to be accountable and honouring the money, and they are so grateful. Just recently, the money that we sent over, at Easter time, they put together bundles of food, and obviously poverty is quite high over there. People trying to earn money, probably $1 a day virtually, trying anything they can to get money and to earn money and get a job. And then while they're struggling with all that, they've actually struggled with COVID. And we know through our connections with Compassion, we first came across this church through Compassion, and we get letters from some of a couple of the kids that we sponsor there and their families. And those kids are still doing their education via what they call module learning, which is the equivalent to either online learning or you call in at the church or the school and pick up your bundle of books and go home and have to work it out by yourself. So while we are having our kids back at school and having greater internet and online learning and teachers being in contact with you, the kids themselves are still struggling with this modular learning. And yet they're in an education system where if you don't literally do the exams and pass, then you can't either go on or you fail and you redo it again. It costs money. How do you do that when you actually don't have a lot of money? It's just a cycle. But this church is really out there and in the face of it all and trying to encourage their kids and their families to walk with Christ, to trust Him and to provide tutoring for free. And they've got their counsellors actually touching base with each of the families. On this particular occasion, they're putting together packages of food and actually giving the food out to people on the street. And I've got a couple of videos I'm going to show. One of them is going to just show the food and the bundles that they're putting together. I'm not sure if in here there's also some of the cooking of it at the church. But it's also some of these people they're giving it to are the people who are riding. I tried to look it up throughout the week, the technical term in their language of it, but I couldn't find it, and then I thought I'd embarrass myself with the pronunciation. So without actually acting it out, I'll just describe it. But some of their means of transport is having this either motorbike or bicycle with seating at the back or at the side that 2 or 3 people can get into. And that's how they're earning their income, some of these people, and trying to feed their families. So they're the sorts of people who don't earn a lot of money that this church, Pastor Lily and Pastor Daniel, are handing out food parcels to and handing it out in the name of Christ in a country that's not encouraging Christianity. It's just bravery personified, I think. Medical assistance, as Garry said, we've got a daughter in hospital at the moment. We don't have to worry about that. We seriously don't have to worry about that. We are so blessed. These people, they are not. And part of what Compassion does, not taking over David Helyard's talk next week, but part of what Compassion does through these churches is to enable kids within these families to get the medical assistance they need. So those families can go straight to the church and say, hey, my child's fallen, is bleeding, is sick, is whatever, and the Compassion people will assist in taking them to medical assistance and paying for it. Two videos to show, and then I might come back afterwards.
Yes, it was.
Oh, sorry.
You just wrecked it. Have you clicked it?
Masih bisa tersenyum dan penuh tawa, semua karena kasih dan anugerahnya. Bila kita masih bisa bernyanyi memuji Dia, bersyukurlah kita karena kebaikannya. Kasihilah Tuhan Allahmu dengan segenap hati, dengan segenap jiwa dan ragamu. Kasihilah sesamamu manusia menikmati.
The second video I'm just going to launch straight into, but the second video is where the church has actually gone to a local school with students who are disabled and blessed them with the food parcels as well.
Okay, guys, so that's the situation. So that was the Easter mission that Southland Church supported. So it's a great thing. It's we don't realise it going out into a Muslim community. Remember, that's where they're going with the food and the COVID stuff, and when it's the Christians who are bringing the food, that actually speaks a lot. These guys all know about Isa. You know, he's a prophet. They all understand that, but when Christians are turning up with the food, the medical supplies, assistance in COVID, and they start to then question, well, hang on, what have we been told about Isa? This sounds different. This Jesus message is a bit different to Isa. What's the they start to question, and we actually start to see people come to faith. Last week, I won't go on much here, Engage Work Faith, we had Craig here. This is something that we're doing through Southland Church. We want to reach the marketplace. We need assistance in that. We can only reach so many. So by equipping Engage Work Faith in this ministry, it allows them to get out and train people into the workplace. But also they've helped train, we've had a young adults night where they did some training on that as well. So it actually is starting to equip Southland people as well in the workplace, be that paid or unpaid workplace, to be able to share the gospel in different scenarios, because some places it's much easier than it is in others to do that. And we're hoping to have more of that training later on for the wider church. Jung Children's Home, this is one from some years ago, and we're still continuing at that. Just to give you an idea, from January to end of April, so just in the 4 months there, Southland Compassion alone gave $3,500 to Jung to keep that going. They were struggling with funds. So we have now picked that up as of last year, and we're continuing to keep that going. On top of that, we've also been able to encourage other sponsors who sponsor Mei Jung, but also if they wish to give through Southland Compassion as well, they can. So there's actually been a lot more money given to to Mei Jung in that process. But Southland Compassion has given $3,500. So thank you to all involved in that. And then finally, we're coming into land. The last one I want to talk about is compassion. You heard Sarah mention before, and we've got David Helyard coming next week. The youth group sponsor a young girl called Kimberlyn there in the bottom left as you're looking at it. She comes from Peru, so they've been sponsoring her probably now for a year and a half, I'm suspecting. But where does that fit? Well, what you'll notice there on the map of Southeast Asia, at the very top, the top left arrow is, of course, at the top of Thailand. That is actually where Mei Jung is. So we have an impact in Thailand there. But also you'll notice that we have the Philippines at Cebu, and also Indonesia, where we currently are situated there. Both of those churches, Cebu, we actually have some young adults who are sponsoring children in a church there in Cebu. We actually have Cebu and a little place called Argao, about 2 hours from Cebu City. So we have an impact there. But also the church where we are supporting for the outreach in the Indonesian community is also a compassion church as well. And they support about 250 primary school kids each week who go there for lessons, food parcels. It was those churches that throughout COVID were supplying a lot of the food to the local communities. So we actually have 3 distinct centres now where we're reaching into Southeast Asia. And long term, probably in the next 18 months or so onwards, and I say this with some question with COVID stuff and travel, but the aim is to engage this. David is here next week, and I believe the sponsor children he'll be bringing for that one are from Cebu City and Argao. And so the idea is that in time to come, we will be wanting to take mission trips to those places. So it's not just about bringing in the money, which is important, and the prayer. My heart longs for the day when we see the Indonesian church thing and the young ones going out on the street, and some of our guys will be going out on the street for those missions as well. That's the sort of thing we want to actually see happening. We want to take people, Sarah and I have been to Cebu several times, we know the area well, Argao, and take them into these churches and see the churches operating and what they're doing. To see the way they go out, they've got the primary school kids coming in, they're feeding them, the way they are actually standing in the gap, particularly against sex trafficking in some of these places. Some of that pornography, child porn, a lot of that stuff. We don't realise it's the churches that are standing in the gap in those communities to try and stop that. So Southland Church is actually having a huge impact. So I'm going to finish it up there because that's really it. As a report, we've tried to be reasonably succinct. But you are making a difference as a church where, we might not seem that big at times, when you look at the whole of Adelaide, but I think we are, in the old boxing terms, I think we are punching way above our weight in the sense of outreach. When you start to think of what's happening on the African continent and all of those pastors who are pastoring churches, and many of them have churches, between 100 to 250, 300 people, you start multiplying that. We've got 16 people there. you start looking at these sorts of things, we are having a real kingdom impact. So, on behalf of Sarah and I, as pastors, we just want to thank you for what you're doing, because you guys are amazing, and we love the fact that it's global, but it's also local. It goes down to the food. You know, there's vouchers. You don't know, sometimes Sarah's giving out a food voucher for Foodland or whatever it is, just for someone in need here as well. There's a lot of stuff goes on behind the scenes. For obvious reasons, we don't make it public because it's a matter of just respecting people's privacy and all of that and building them up. We just want you to know it is happening. It is happening. You are making a difference. So God bless you for that.